Good afternoon, and welcome to Associated Black Charities and our monthly Equity at Work webinar series. We're so happy to have you join us for this lunch and learn opportunity today. My name is Chrissy Thornton, and I am the president and CEO of Associated Black Charities. And Equity at Work is one of the highlights of my month because we get the opportunity to speak with Black professionals and other allied professionals who have lived experiences with specific topics and issues that show up as barriers for Black professionals in the workplace. And today is no different. We get to talk today about inclusive language and communication. Inclusive language is a powerful tool that fosters a sense of belonging and respect in the workplace, particularly for Black professionals. By intentionally using language that acknowledges and celebrates diversity, companies and people can create an environment where everyone feels valued. This, of course, goes beyond avoiding offensive terms. It includes recognizing cultural differences, respecting identity, and amplifying the voices of Black professionals. Our language shapes workplace culture, and when used inclusively, it can break down barriers and promote unity and equity. A commitment to diversity and inclusion requires ongoing education, introspection, and a willingness to engage in meaningful dialogue, which we'll have today. By doing so, workplaces and professionals can nurture a culture where all professionals, and specifically Black professionals, can thrive, can innovate, and can lead. Welcome to today's Equity at Work, and I'm so excited to ask our guest panelists to join me on screen. Good afternoon. We are so excited to have both of you. Welcome, welcome. We're going to encourage those who are viewing online or through the webinar platform today to be engaged, to make sure that you're sharing your lived experience, you're asking questions of our panelists who are here to lend their expertise and also their experience with inclusive language and communication. And at this time, I'd love to give both of you an opportunity to not just introduce yourselves, but also to tell us why you felt today's conversation was so relevant and important. And we'll start with you, Candace Gray.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chrissy, and everyone at Associated Black Charities for having me today. My name is Candace Gray. I am the Director of Education and Outreach with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. My role with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights is to enforce Title 19 and Title 20 laws to eradicate discrimination in employment, housing, public places, health services, and state contracts. So today's conversation of inclusive language and communication is so important to me because it's important for us to highlight that inclusive language and communication increases respect, a more equitable and cohesive society within the workplace. And also inclusive language helps us to pay attention to and give value to people who have been historically devalued and marginalized.
Absolutely. And we're so glad to have you here. Thank you. And Rhonda Cox, welcome.
Hey, everybody. My name is Rhonda L. Cox. I'm twofold. I am also known as the international event producer. And currently, I also am occupying the position of Director of Family Services for St. Vincent de Paul Head Start. I know that my resume had some other items in there, but transitioning is transitioning and life is life. But right. I am excited and proud to share those two titles. I was born in Henderson, Nevada. I'm a military child, Air Force. I resided in Virginia, was raised in Virginia and Tennessee, so I'm also a country girl in a sense. I graduated from the University of Richmond in 2002, and that is when I moved to Maryland, where I currently reside. Proud mother of two beautiful jewels in my crown. I have a 20-year-old who attends Clark Atlanta University, a graduate of City. She is a City graduate, and then a beautiful 7-year-old who is a second grader. And so you'll hear more about them, I'm sure, as I move forward. But I live a very holistic lifestyle. And in that aspect, I understand how words can empower as well as disempower individuals, and how we have to be very intentional about what it is that we say, the words that we use, how we address each other, and even how we address ourselves. So I'm very big on being kind and generous and showing grace to yourself as well as to others. And I'm excited, to have this conversation because it is very important, especially as Black professionals, that we teach others how to treat us. And so I feel like this is a great start to that conversation. So thank you for this opportunity.
I absolutely love some of that you brought forward, that we have to teach people how to treat us. Yes. And I am excited about hearing the importance of how we regard ourselves and how we reference ourselves. So we're going to dive right into this conversation. You also brought your children up, which I love, because part of the reason why we have these conversations and we have them publicly, some of which are considered very taboo, right, to expose some of our safe space discussion, is so that allies can watch, can learn, can know that some of these things are creating barriers and obstacles for us in our success in the workplaces, and that they can stand shoulder to shoulder with us and activate. So today, I'm excited to talk about inclusive language and communication at work. And let's talk about what that means. I said earlier that it is more than just avoiding offensive language, right? Like, you can't feel inclusive in your communication just because you say the things that are completely egregious and universally unaccepted, right? Like the epitaphs and the things that we know are aggressive and foul and not appropriate to say. It's more than that. We said it talks about acknowledging and celebrating diversity. It talks about respecting identity and how we show up and who we tell you we are, recognizing our cultural differences and amplifying the voices of Black people and other underrepresented groups. What do you think about it? Like, if you just think about what it is, what it means to be inclusive in your language and communication, what does that mean to you?
I'll go ahead and jump in. So, what inclusive language and communication means to me is being self aware and being aware of those around you. A lot of times, sometimes professionals or individuals who are higher up may not realize how they need to just expand their horizons in the way that they think when addressing staff, when addressing their team. Also, communication is more than just words. It's about body language and tone as well. All those things coincide with effective communication. Inclusive language, again, as you mentioned earlier, Chrissy, doesn't just cover offensive terms, but also ableist language, also affirmative language versus negative language. All these things are so important when we discuss inclusive language. And also, another thing when it comes to inclusive language and communication, ensuring that the words that we speak provide opportunities and encouragement for individuals in the workplace. That it's very important for individuals to be and feel included, and for those supervisors or individuals in the workplace to provide a sense of belonging and a place of comfort through our words and our body language and communication as a whole.
Absolutely. Rhonda?
Yeah, so when I think about the term inclusive language, it's all about respect for me. When she talked about being self-aware, yes, you've done the work. And so you know who you are. And when you show up to your place of business or you show up to meetings or anything like that, you're showing up as the version of yourself that you want others to respect you as. And then also having taking a feel or taking the temperature of the staff. I'm a director. So I have a team of individuals with different personalities, different cultural backgrounds, different nationalities, different races, different sexual preferences, and all of that. And so as a leader, you have to be very mindful of that. And the opposite of inclusive is bias. You have to make sure that you're not coming into these situations biased. And so that means that you actually have to do the work. You cannot go into being a leader ignorant and just, oh, well, I don't know what they're calling them these days type of mindset. No, you have to really do the work to familiarize yourself so that you can be an effective leader, someone that your team feels comfortable having uncomfortable conversations with. They're expecting you to protect them in a sense, to create an environment where they feel safe, they feel seen, that it is a sacred, safe space. And so that's kind of like when I have these conversations or I do professional etiquette trainings, it's all about understanding the terminologies and the intentions that you want to set as a leader.
I love that. One of the presentations that I do is all about multi-generational communication in the workplace, because people will tell you now we have the largest span of people actively in the workplace ever, right? Like, different generations of people represented, and with different value systems, with different communication styles. And it really does cause you, as you mentioned, as a leader, to have to relate to people and be cognizant at all different levels. But I want to go right into it, because there are people who are watching, maybe some Black professionals who haven't had as much lived experience with the aggression of it all. And there may be some allies like, what are you talking about? Like, of course, we don't say those things at work. And I want to needle down into examples of how language and communication shows up in the workplace when it's not inclusive. And these are some of the things specifically that Black professionals have to navigate, in addition to the work tasks that they have to complete, in addition to showing up and combating structural racism and the ways that inherently shows up. I want to talk about microaggressions and interactions at work. I'll give you a couple, and then I have a long list that I kind of want to navigate. I'd love to hear some of the examples that you all want to bring up, but one of the most common that I've experienced in the workplace, specifically in white workspaces, is being told that I am articulate or I speak so well, right? The stereotype of that. What are we thinking about microaggressions and how Black professionals have to navigate that just by showing up and being who they are?
When's the first time I heard that statement? As I stated, I was raised in Virginia, but I spent summers in Tennessee with my father. And sometimes when I would hang out with my friends there, they would be, children can be cruel and not even know that they're being cruel. But I would often hear, you talk so proper. You must go to a proper school. You talk white. And I didn't know what that meant. Like, I'm just talking to you. They're like, say water. Say water, say, like they want you to say these different words. And so I'm just like, I didn't get it then. But then now, fast forward to being a professional and hearing code switching, that term a lot. Oh, you sound, put on your white voice. When you call somebody and, the running joke is, if you want the police to arrive in a quicker response time, put on your white voice. And I'm like, what does that mean? I don't think that it's a Black or white thing. I think it's just how you pronounce and enunciate your words. Not that I'm trying to be anything but who I am. And so, yeah, it is irritating, I can imagine, to be in a workspace and be in a room full of other professionals and someone want to bring up that point that you speak so well. Well, how am I supposed to speak? Are we not all highly educated individuals in this room? I'm confused. So yeah, like those microaggressions definitely do come up and rub you the wrong way.
I want to hear from Candace, but really quickly, if you've heard that one in particular, the you don't sound Black, you talk white, you are articulate, put it in the chat so that
they
we know
surprised when they see you in real life, as
right,
opposed
right.
to
They
over
didn't
the
know.
phone.
If you've heard that, put that in the chat. Candace, love to hear from you.
So I can relate with Rhonda. I was raised in Dayton, Ohio, and I also went to private Catholic schooling. So when I would go back to my side of the town or in my neighborhood, I would hear you talk like a white girl. And it was so confusing to me. Even my place of worship was very diverse. So when I'm again in my neighborhood or around people that I am familiar with, it would just be confusing to me, and it would make me feel like I didn't belong. Like, well, why are we discussing the way that I speak or, how articulate I am? And even when moving to Maryland, I would hear, wow, you sound educated. And I would be appalled by these statements because why are we saying that? You wouldn't say that to my counterpart who is not a Black woman. There have been times that I've experienced in my career, one assuming that I am not qualified for the position because of being a young Black female. There have been times where I've experienced a former CEO saying, oh, Candace, well, let's wait until you finish that degree or until you have a little bit more experience to implement this project, not knowing, if you looked at my resume, I've been implementing these things for years. So those microaggressions based on my skin skin color, is it's very frustrating, because when you look at the data and you look at the resume, you will see that I am extremely qualified for, what we're doing and where we are. And even as a director and a supervisor during my career, seeing other people make judgments about one's belonging, if you're Black, or you are a person of color, are you from the United States, or are you, do you belong here, or what experience do you have, which is, those microaggressions can really hinder one, and even it could discourage one from growing professionally.
Absolutely. And I love that the people who are viewing are putting their experiences in the chat. It's almost sad that we have this commonality that just that one microaggression has touched so many people along their journey. So we know, and I'm going to share so we can educate, you're so articulate, you don't sound Black. Those are questions of competence and intelligence. They imply surprise that a Black person can speak well, suggesting that it is unexpected for them to be eloquent, right? But we also hear other things at work, an invalidation of our identity and experiences, like people who will say things like, I don't see color, or, all lives matter. Everyone's the same for me. You talked about assuming background or interest, people asking, where are you really from? Or assuming that you can dance, or that you like rap music, or that you watch certain shows on television. I love this one, tokenism. And I've certainly received this one, that you're different from the other Black people. I know, right? Like isolating you as, someone who is not relatable to the rest of your community. Or exoticism, like, I wish I had your lips, or your hair is so beautiful, or, those kind of things. And then this is the one that lights me up the most. And please share in the comments, and the two of you share too. It is the stereotyping of emotional responses, the relax, calm down. And I wonder if people even know that those are microaggressions against race. I'd love to hear from you.
I think that sometimes individuals don't know that they are microaggressions against race, which is why this conversation is so important, which is also why it's so important for individuals to look into seminars, listen to podcasts or webinars, and look into trainings that are available so that they can be aware. A lot of individuals are ignorant to things such as microaggressions, even against their own cultures, because they are unaware. And I see in the chat, somebody says the angry Black woman stereotype. I've experienced that, individuals saying, why are you so angry and so upset? And I like to say, well, I'm passionate, and this topic is very important to me. So I like to share and elaborate on these things, as opposed to me being angry. And it's definitely, with microaggressions, it's frustrating, because it's obvious that when I'm around other colleagues that don't look like me, these microaggressions are not happening. It's more common within the culture of being a person of color.
Rhonda?
Yeah. So when we first started having this conversation, I talked about the ignorance factor. And it's you don't know what you don't know. And I agree with Candace in her statement that you have to seek out these type of webinars and trainings and implement cultural sensitivity trainings into your workplaces, because they're called micro for a reason. That means that they're very small. They're very, oh, can I touch your hair? Or, Candace and I was talking about us being blonde bombshells. And, one thing that happens oftentimes in workplaces is that we will come to work one day and our hair will be right here. And then we go away for the weekend and come back and we got braids down, and, and it's a cultural thing. And I don't want to think that questions all the time are malicious, but we just have to share with individuals, how do you appropriately approach these topic of conversations? No, you cannot touch my hair, but maybe, you know what, I love the way you styled your hair today, and start the conversation that way. Not, no, didn't you just have short hair yesterday? Like, don't do that, because we're not talking about you and what you did yesterday. So it's just teaching individuals how to appropriately approach these type of conversations to eliminate these microaggressions, if you will.
I want to build on that too briefly. Again, with just teaching is so important. I was with the Boys and Girls Clubs for 13 years. prior to joining the commission, and I worked with Boys and Girls Clubs in Kentucky. And in Kentucky, the club where I was predominantly white. I was literally the only Black person there. And one day I had a big Afro puff, and the next day I had cornrows. And I thought it was important to create a PowerPoint to share with the students and some of the kids. This is Miss Candace's culture. This is these are the details of our different hair textures and where we were from, so that they would feel comfortable to communicate with me about it. Clearly they were confused because it was unfamiliar, the culture difference, but I thought that it was very important to break it down. And even being a person in leadership, it is important for us to take a stance and be bold and not wait for someone else to initiate the topic. It is important for us to initiate these types of training. So I just wanted to add that tidbit, how, it was important to educate the youth.
And I think it's also important for us to have the language to combat the ignorance. I know I'm still a work in progress. Sometimes when microaggressions come my way or I hear them in rooms, I'm like rageful, right? Like ready to flip the table. And I've learned and I'm learning sometimes to have the right words to counteract it is the most productive thing. So I see someone in the chat who says in their company, upper management, leadership, always say, I don't see color. And so part of the research said that an appropriate, context to that is to share that by them stating that, it negates the reality of racism and the lived experience of Black people by pretending race doesn't matter or doesn't exist. So imagine someone in the workplace saying to you, I don't see color, and you being able to say thank you for that. But that negates the reality of racism and the lived experience of Black people. So we have to also start to equip ourselves with what we need to say in response. All too often, and I am famous for it, it'll be like an hour later, and then I'll be like, wait a minute, what did she say? And be enraged, but not have, directly addressed it at that time. What do you all think about addressing it and the safety or lack of safety of addressing language and communication that is not inclusive?
I feel like I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
No, I was saying that it all goes back to what I said in the very beginning. You have to teach people how to treat you. And there is a way that you can go about correcting individuals respectfully. Again, like you said, you have to be able to provide them as well as yourself with the appropriate verbiage so that you're getting your point across without becoming the angry Black woman, and things like that. You just have to create that space. And then, like I said before, being a director, allow their opportunities. We do a lot of professional development days in the education system. And it's more than just about how do you interact with the families and the scholars. It's about how do you interact with your peers and being able to create that safe space where if you are feeling marginalized or if you are feeling isolated or any of those things, that there is a system put in place that allows you to appropriately handle those so that you don't feel dismissed, you don't feel disregarded, you don't feel like your questions, comments, or concerns are being swept underneath an HR rug. Like you really need to identify your systems and make sure that they're appropriate, make sure that there's appropriate representation on the committees that are forming these systems and protocols in the workplace so that there is equal representation from all involved.
Absolutely.
I agree. Addressing microaggressions is so important. Even here at our place of work, we have lunch and learns, just as we are on a Zoom lunch and learn now, creating lunch and learns in a safe place, a safe space for individuals to learn about what to do and what not to do is extremely important so that we can nip it in the bud. Just like small wins turn into big wins, small issues turn into big issues. So we don't want to collect multiple small issues and then it's time to explode. We want to definitely ensure that we are proactive over reactive. So taking initiation as leaders is what's most important. Taking initiation to address this head on in a teachable way, such as a lunch and learn. I remember I was in high school and I noticed some of the young white guys would address me in a different way from the young ladies. So again, that was back in the day. So I would immediately say like, hey, well, why did you say that to me, but you did not say that to her? Let's talk about this. Now, in a place of work, place of employment, I believe that a better approach would be to create a lunch and learn or have a guided discussion, being intentional about the approach. However, addressing it again intentionally and immediately, I think is very important to eliminate these things from just exploding or from us elaborating in a negative way.
And so many people are agreeing with you all, like address it now in the moment. Go ahead, Rhonda.
And if I can, I wish that 43-year-old Rhonda could reach back and talk to 16-year-old Rhonda, because I encountered that. As I stated, I was raised in Virginia. I was the only Black to graduate out of the class of 1998. Like literally, if we were on one of those shows where they would pop up the picture in the corner, like you would be like, oh, there she is, right there on the front row. I probably was one of the first, I believe, Blacks to even have representation on the National Honor Society. It was a lot of firsts there. But I remember as I was preparing to apply for colleges, I wanted to go to Spelman. And so I applied. And I remember being told by someone in a position that should have been wish he had this type of cultural sensitivity conversation. And I don't believe he was probably meaning it in a malicious way, again, because I always like to believe the good in folks. Are you sure that you would want to go there? That could be a culture shock to you. This is what I was advised. And as a result, I did not go. And so I'm just like, oh, I wish in that moment I could have said, if I had the knowledge of 43-year-old Rhonda to be able to communicate how this is a choice for me, not for you or what you think. And so that's why I was super excited when my daughter, she applied to 14 different colleges, but she was very clear about attending an HBCU. And so she's now at Clark Atlanta, her third year, and I have to live vicariously through her. But I'm glad that she owned that, like this is what I wanted to do. So again, it does start, even like you said, when you were in high school, it starts there. Just making sure that the people that are guiding our youth, guiding our scholars, are being mindful of the words and the language that they're using, because those are impacting the Black professionals of today.
Mm-hmm. And people are agreeing with you in the chat. One person wrote, though, that it becomes draining and frustrating, which I agree. I'm not where either of you are. In some ways, I've earned the right to be the angry Black woman. And it is very, demoralizing, right? And difficult to always feel like you have to educate people on who you are and why you deserve basic human kindness and respect. But here's what we know. If a workplace tolerates this kind of, disinclusion, it leads to decreased morale and engagement. It leads to high turnover because Black professionals then do not bring their best selves. They do not bring their best performance. They do not contribute at the highest level that they're able to. And that affects the business, the bottom line, the productivity, and all of the things. And so we are here today, hopefully, to have the conversations to equip people with not only the language to use, but the confidence to use it in spaces where we need to combat this. I'd love to hear more about any additional lived experience you've had with maybe language or communication in workplaces that hasn't been so affirming, and how you either have chosen to address it or wish you had chosen to address it.
I have a couple of examples. I'm trying to figure out how to put it into words so that I don't share too much, if to be respectful of the situation, the organization that I experienced it with. But there were times as a leader in a workplace, I was a director at the time, and my supervisor would address me with tons of micro assaults, micro insults, micro invalidations. And I mean, literally, I felt like I was boiling. We were in a staff meeting, and I am clearly being disrespected because of this person's lack of knowledge, or maybe they are aware and they don't care. Sometimes I've experienced individuals showing that they try, but you really aren't doing the research. You really aren't tapping into stop the microaggressions. So there was a time I was in a meeting and I had to excuse myself, So I'm like, pardon me, I need to dismiss myself. And then I had to schedule a meeting with this individual to share, this person shows these micro invalidations as if they don't see race, or they are being disrespectful and sharing these microaggressions and insults. And I had to present to them information of what this is. This is a microaggression. This makes me feel like I don't want to work here. I don't feel like I'm a part of the team. And I literally have to make sure I practice self-care in certain ways to impact my mental health in a positive light. And again, outside of being a woman of color, I look young, and being young, that is also something that has been, I don't want to say an issue, but highlighted, people saying, are you even old enough to work here? Things like that. So I literally have had to step up, even being afraid. And I was always taught, do it afraid, even if you feel uncomfortable, still take initiation. And having to pull this individual to the side and let them know this is really bothering me. And I don't want to touch on then our professionalism, because also we're in a meeting, you're showing microaggressions and you don't have an agenda. I don't even want to be here. This is unorganized. So, there have been times where I've had to just address these situations, and do it afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. So I guess I'm on the flip side. I think that I have been fortunate to find employment in agencies that are, I feel like, doing a valid job of making sure that they are being very culturally sensitive, changing policies like acknowledging Juneteenth, giving all staff that day off, recognizing it for what it is, and not just giving staff the day off, but making sure that around that time, social media posts, gifts to staff members, emails are about celebrating. Of course, you hear folks that have the naysayers. And so for me, like, again, I talked about being in this holistic space. I don't subscribe to the negativity. I don't like low vibration. I embrace the high vibration. So I have a tendency to not gravitate towards individuals who have the negative things to say when folks are really trying to put in the work. So you do have those individuals that come across, be like, what's this little cookie supposed to do, or whatever, but not even acknowledging the fact that it was purchased from a Black owned bakery.
Mm-hmm. So when they go low, you go high.
I'm
trying to get there. When they go low, but I'm
yeah,
working.
no, but it's like you take those moments and you're saying, hey, but do you know where that cookie came from?
Mhm.
Like acknowledging that everything is not going to change overnight. As you stated before, Chrissy, we are in organizations that have 5 different generations in it at a time, from the baby boomers down to what they call them, the Gen Alpha. Like these folks. And so we're trying to learn to navigate those generational gaps and just being mindful of that. And I applaud the efforts of individuals who are in a position of leadership that are trying to create working environments where individuals do feel seen, supported, heard, validated. It's not perfect. Even in my own personal business as an international event producer, I've had to really, what did they say on Scandal? I got to do twice the work
Twice
in
as
order to
good,
get
twice
half
half as
the
much.
half as much. Like, they look at me sometimes and they're like, "What does this Black woman know about international?" A lot, Bookie. Like I know a lot because I put in the work. Respect when folks are showing up, again, as I said before, as their authentic self. Another point that I wanted to make, shifting, talking about the different generations, and again, the LGBTQA plus community. I consider myself an ally in that aspect. And when you started seeing the trend of emails coming, and it was her, she, his, him, and things like that, the baby boomers are like, what is this? Why we now got to acknowledge, and things like that. But again, it is a nod towards companies taking the step to embrace not what has been, but understanding the shift, the cultural shifts, not just a Black-white cultural shift, but an inclusive shift amongst individuals. And again, respecting those for who they're showing up as. and being mindful of that and allowing the space to do that. So I know it kind of probably went all over the place, but for me, I just want to celebrate those companies that are putting forth the effort to make the difference, make the impact.
Candace?
Rhonda, you triggered a good thought in my mind. So when you said just mentioning the culture shift, it made me think of a culture add in as opposed to a culture fit in. A lot of times we see individuals and we try to fit them into a space, or fit them into a box, as opposed to adding them in to, adding their difference or adding their similarity. Instead of putting them in a box. So I think it's important to highlight that culture add in as opposed to a culture fit in. And also, I wanted to highlight, I like that you mentioned, paying attention to those high vibrations. In spite of experiencing those times where, we may have experienced a neglect when it comes to inclusive language and communication, but it is so important for us to think about the good that we have experienced when it comes to inclusivity as well, and how that made us feel. Experiencing inclusivity, inclusive language and communication helps us to work with a greater diligence, and also amplifies our efforts that we put toward the workplace. So I like that you said that, and I wanted to build on that.
Thank you.
Now, I'm getting ready to play devil's advocate, but first, let me take a question. It says in the chat, someone had an experience where executive leadership asked them to educate their other colleagues on the Black experience, such as an experience such as after the murder of George Floyd. And that's actually listed as a microaggression and the opposite of inclusive language, because that is what's considered being assigned a spokesperson role. Like asking a Black professional now to represent or explain the entire Black community's perspective, which is an unfair burden on them. And then, as we know, we're not monolithic. So we want to put that on the list of things to call out that aren't right to do. But here's my devil's advocate. There are some people who are going to say, just go to work, do your job, and go home, right? Go to work, be Candace, be Rhonda, be Chrissy. I don't care if you're Black, white, he, she, they, leave all that at the door, come in, do the job, and go home. That this push for equity and inclusion is just too much of a burden to place on a workplace that is there to exist just to get the work done. So I'm putting that out, not because I feel that way, obviously, but because I want to hear your thoughts on that argument that we're starting to ask too much of workplaces to offer us validation when all we need to do is just come on, do the work, and go on back out.
I would like to say in the past that workplaces, they didn't ask enough. We are at work. This is a place of employment, a place where professionals are coming together to get the job done. However, at the end of the day, we are people. We are humans. We are human beings, not human doings. Even though sometimes people act like they're human doings, we are not robots. And this is personal. So our hearts matter, our emotions matter. It is important to highlight positive mental health. It is important to highlight how therapy may be great. And it doesn't mean that if you're in therapy, you have an issue. You just want to expand upon the knowledge that you already have. So, I don't want to say it's an old school way of thinking, but it's an ignorant way of thinking because of individuals not tapping into a higher approach to discussing these things in a workplace. We need to sometimes create surveys to hear about what's going on, or there may need to be a task force around this subject. And even one saying, just go to work and go home. That sounds a little devastating. We spend majority of our time at work. So it's important that the workplace is a healthy space. Again, we do need to get this data. We do need to accomplish these deliverables, but it's so important for us to have committees and groups to highlight inclusive language. Even if there is a fun committee and that committee has lunch and learns or outings for staff, so that we can feel more, be a team. It's important to challenge stereotypes and encourage open dialogues so that we can be less ignorant. So,
Love
yes.
that. Rhonda?
Immediately, my thought came to, if not me, who? If not now, when? And so I think about, like, when I came to the Head Start program, I began changing the language. These are not children. I don't like to use the word children because, again, I'm trying to control the narrative of what Head Start is. Head Start is a quality early childhood education program. We are not daycare. And as such, I began referring to our children as scholars. Words matter. And so, again, I took a stance on that. I did get some pushback on some folks. Some folks are like, oh, scholars, that indicates that they're on scholarship. No, it doesn't. It indicates that they are pursuing education, even at the age of 3. And so when you start speaking these words of positivity into children, when they walk through the door, they become scholars. And when we walk out of these doors, they become whatever it is that their hearts desire. And so I took that stance. I didn't just come to work and do my job. I felt passionate about something. I put passion behind it. I use the word so often now that it is second nature in the conversations when we're discussing it. I also believe in St. Vincent de Paul has one of the largest homeless services programs in the city. And so for me, we have a lot of those families that come through the door, but I do not refer to them as homeless people. They are individuals that are experiencing homelessness. It is a situation that they're in. An example to show you the duality of that, I am a Black woman. When I walk in the room, that is it. I can't change that. This is who I am. But if I walk into a room as somebody who is experiencing homelessness, that means that is a temporary situation that I am in. That is not who I am. Another way that I use that is when we refer to individuals with mental health. I worked for the League with People with Disabilities for a number of years with the autism program. I don't like to refer to our scholars as being autistic. I like to refer to them as individuals, scholars who are experiencing autism or who have autism. Because again, I'm not going to define you by one label. We have to stop putting individuals in these fit-in boxes, as Candace referenced, and start really expanding out and tapping into the essence of who individuals are. And so again, if not me, who? If not now, when? So that's my thoughts on that piece.
So I'm glad we're here because now it's time to talk about what our responsibilities are toward making workplaces more inclusive, more culturally engaged. And some of the ways that we can do that are by committing to our own continuous learning, right? Like we don't want to be enemies of the progress either, as we're fighting for our inclusion and making sure that Black professionals are respected. Do we understand and use pronouns correctly? Are we willing to shift our thinking around that? Are we using culturally appropriate terms, including in reference to ourselves, which I love that you brought that up. It's our responsibility to educate ourselves on different things so that we too avoid stereotypes and we lead the way on that conduct. And then of course, you mentioned having influence over policies and workplace guidelines and leading by example. One of the things that, just to bring into this conversation about Black professionals, is there's this debate and tug of war around who we are, right? Are we African American? Are we colored? I hope not. Are we Black? Are we people of color, BIPOC? And one of the biggest things that I've come up with is just ask, right? Like ask me how if you can't denote it by how I refer to myself, ask respectfully how you should refer to me. I use the word Black unapologetically, and I have rationale for that. Other people say African American. I don't want you to be politically, on edge around me. Just ask. What do you think about things like that? Tips for us to be responsible and to push the work forward.
Well, in the workplace, again, I mentioned, creating a task force or committees, surveys, celebrating progress. That's very important. Here at the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights in the Education and Outreach Unit, we provide trainings where we talk about that affirmative language versus negative language that Rhonda mentioned, and also the offensive language or gendered language, ableist language. Those things are very important, and we ensure that we provide the trainings as we are providing to state agencies or private sectors and public sectors. We are also providing these trainings internally for our staff as well. when we are at community events and festivals, we're ensuring that we have interactive boards on our table where we're actually teaching individuals as opposed to them just stopping by and grabbing a brochure. We have examples that we're sharing, but in the workplace, it's extremely important for groups of individuals to come together and say, hey, let's talk about this language, or let's discuss how we can have a group once every other month and we're having a game night and we're highlighting these things. And even in the game night with bingo, it's ways that we can teach around civil rights and inclusivity and equity in a fun way. So just do it. We
Mhm.
talk a good game, but it has to be in action. Like we need to be in action. Everything needs to be a verb, honestly. And as I mentioned, those things such as trainings, workshops, seminars, um, committees and groups, so that we can put these things into action. So everyone in the chat, everyone watching, don't be afraid, step up. You are fully equipped to take action and be that individual in your community to make a difference.
We like to talk on these webinars about when enough is enough as well. I'll share a little bit of my lived experience. At a previous job, I was working with a vendor, and it was very clear by how the vendor related to me that he did not show respect for Black people, for women, and certainly not Black women. And I, sought out support and safe space from then, a member of my board of directors. And when I went and explained the experience I was having, thinking, that I would find fairness and justice and all of these things in the workplace, the individual said to me, as I relayed what had occurred, well, it's not like he called you and I turned my head at the time, and I wish I hadn't, because I wish he had just said it straight out. But it's like, a lot of these workplaces feel like if it's not egregious to the point that it's using language that is commonly accepted, that you should just, accept it and move on. So what is your advice, as we start to wrap up a little bit, for Black professionals who do address it, who have the courage to call it out every time, who have the professional language, not in anger, to use to try to educate people, but still push up against a wall of ignorance, of like buried heads in the sand, and people who won't align with them in advocacy?
I would, what do I tell myself? I make it personal.
Mhm.
Because I do find myself in a position where I'm very, like, my throat chakra, for those that are about the chakras, is very open. So I don't have a problem expressing or articulating or speaking up against anything that I feel like is not in alignment. It is not for my highest, most loving good. And so for me, I say, just take the breath. Take the breath and remember your why. Remember that Rome was not built overnight. It does definitely take, and find your village. That's my whole thing. If you find individuals that are like-minded as you, and then together you collectively decide that you are going to speak the truths and again, teach people how to treat you, then, at least you know that you're not by yourself. But even if you don't have a village, and I'm talking to whoever it is right now, I'm gonna look right into the camera and let you know, I support you 100% when you stand on truth, when you stand on business, when you control the narrative, when you step up when others are stepping back, and just making sure that you are self-respecting and respecting of others. I liked what you said, Chrissy, when you said just ask, because that's where it starts. And then respect what the person's response is. Don't question them. Don't try to talk them out of, don't try to convince them otherwise. That is who they are. That is their truth. Your uncomfortableness with that is not their problem, it's yours. And so I just want to encourage people to continue to show up as the best version of themselves. Even if you are a work in progress, trust and believe, I put myself back together every other day. But again, just being confident and having the courage to just move forward with it, and change will come.
Mhm. And
We
every
are,
space isn't for everybody, right?
every space is not for everybody. And then if you do feel like you're in a space that's just not, it's a low vibration for you, you do have the right to remove yourself. You don't have to feel like you have to change every environment that you're in. That is a huge ask for one person, but you can at least make the effort and then move on. Understand when your assignment is up.
Yes. And Candace, before you share, I just want to bring this into the conversation because I don't want to ignore it. One of the comments talks about how sometimes tones that are negative towards specifically Black women in workplaces are perpetuated by other Black people. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing that into the conversation, that this is not a us against them. This is about respect and receiving it from all ways that people show up and commanding it for ourselves, no matter if they look like us or not. But Candace, I would love to hear. I'm a proponent, and I'm thinking about some of my mentors who would tell me, here's the answer. Like sometimes you got to just, every environment is not one that you're called to fix.
Mhm.
And sometimes you have to seek out safety, not telling people to walk away from livelihood, right?
We're not Beyonce on here telling y'all to
Nope, nope,
leave your
nope,
jobs.
no, but maybe start putting and activating a plan to get you to safety. But Candace, love to hear from you.
Yes, I would like to build on what you, Rhonda, and Chrissy, you have mentioned. And one of the comments says that they're a social worker and their main focus is to provide service to the residents. They try not to entertain the ignorance and they pray a lot. They pick and choose their battles. There are some good things at their place of employment, and there are those little microaggressions. So with that being stated, I do want to highlight sometimes it's important to document incidents. It's important to have dates. It's important to take notes because you never know when you may need to use that to represent yourself. You may be unaware of a case that is occurring that is trying to dismantle these issues and these barriers. So, you know, in a place of work, data is so important, so just it sometimes it may be important to document incidents, just to cover yourself, and when you are deciphering whether it is your time to go, looking at your pros and cons, and your pros and cons can be involved with these documents. Documenting incidents, documentation is very important because if there is a legal matter that happens, again, the individuals or places of employment, this could result into legal compliance risk. If there are legal things that occur, it is so important to have data and document. And then even on a positive mental health note, it's important to have data and document in your journal because maybe you were having a rough week and it was very negative in your journal, but then you realize it was more positive. So you can see something internally that is going on that shows the difference in between what's happening externally at work.
I love that. And I'm getting ready to turn it over to both of you for some final and closing remarks. This concept of high vibrations, I'm so appreciative for that. They go low, go stay high, find the positive in all of it. What I say, and my practice has been also that you won't abuse me behind closed doors, which means that I might have to endure it for a night, but joy comes in the morning because when I get out of that situation, I'm gonna tell everybody I can. I'm gonna sit on webinars and tell them what you did. But this is a conversation we could have for another hour and talk about all the ways that we could advocate for ourselves and empower ourselves as Black professionals to effect change. But I'd love for you all to kind of give your closing remarks, as unfortunately we have to wrap up, just to empower the people to do what you've done this whole webinar and give them some more reflection points. So we'll start the opposite way that we started, and we'll start with you, Rhonda, to give your remarks.
Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to the Associated Black Charities for even creating this type of platform for individuals to come forward and even to speak on this. It's much needed. I hope that other organizations take note and replicate it. And, I am open to being on any panel that talks about empowering individuals, especially when it comes to women, especially when it comes to Black women. Not saying that I'm not here to support all, but that is a passion project for me. I think about it in this aspect. I shared with you that I'm raising two daughters, one's 20 and one is 7. And what the takeaway for me has always been for my daughters is that just figure out on your own time schedule who you are as a person. And once you figure out who that individual is, honor her each and every day in your actions, your thoughts, your words, your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, everything that you do. And there are going to be individuals that are going to come up against you. And just know they are going to come. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to sell my daughters these dreams. There are going to be individuals that you're going to come up against that are not going to like you simply because of you, because of who you are, who you represent, how you vibrate. Two things. That is their business, not yours. And do not allow individuals to live rent free in your head and in your spirit. And so I also teach them that when they see injustices being done either to themselves or to those around them, to say something. Because again, I know I'm like a broken record, but if not me, who? If not when? Now. We got to do it now. And so I say that to everyone on here. Just continue to feel empowered. Speak words into yourself. We didn't even touch on that, but I'm big on positive affirmations and speaking into yourself because you cannot pour from an empty pot. And so you have to continuously be able to speak it. So even when those around you are not speaking the language or the words that you need to hear, just know that there is power in your own tongue. And so you have to speak those things as they are. And that's my be well, loves.
Thank you. And Candace.
Yes, that was amazing, Rhonda. Again, I would like to say thank you to Chrissy and everyone at Associated Black Charities for having me today. This was an amazing conversation and great exchange of ideas. As I mentioned earlier, inclusive language helps us to pay attention to individuals and give people value, especially those who have been historically devalued and marginalized. So it's just so important that we educate ourselves and educate those around us so that we know our whys. Sometimes in our society, individuals have wanted to eliminate our history, throw away our books, and that hinders the future. It hinders our youth. It hinders individuals for knowing why they are fighting for what they're fighting for now. So it's so important to know our history. It's so important to dive into these conversations and do it afraid. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but we grow through our discomfort. And the only thing constant in life is change, and things are forever changing. So, continue to dive in. Shout out to everyone who logged in today. Shout out to everyone who's going to view this later, because this is another step of you diving in and taking initiative to learn and grow. So continue to be great and live well. Thank you all.
Thank you both so very much. And thank all of you for watching today too and joining Equity at Work. We are so excited to present this webinar monthly. And in October, you can join us for Equity at Work, where we will focus our discussion on fair hiring practices. And again, thank you for joining us for Associated Black Charities. I am Chrissy Thornton. Good afternoon.